We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. Vicky Davis is here as well on this final broadcast of 2019. It is December 28, 2019, and we just have a few days left of this year, and 2019 is history. And it will probably go down in the history books as one of the weirdest years that we've ever had. Good morning, Vicky.
Good morning.
I trust you've had a good
I think it's
Christmas.
Just all in the lead up to 2020.
Yeah, the big 2020, and honestly, a lot of things, this plan for world government was supposed to be completed by 2020. And here we are again, still talking about it. Now, of course, they certainly have put the acceleration on everything, including censorship. 2019, I think, was a banner year for censorship.
Yeah,
and this
they're closer than what we know, actually, than what we think. So.
Well, the people don't. I wish more people were paying attention, and that's always the case. However, I think because they've moved so fast, they've managed to wake up a lot of people. There's a lot of people that used to think that we were conspiracy theorists and conspiracy nuts, and since they've moved so fast, now it's kind of hard to ignore the reality that was staring us point blank in the face.
Right. Well, and if all you watch is the political scene, this person, that person, and what they're all saying, you pick up pieces of it, but you don't really see it. The way you see it is to follow the agreements that our country has signed. What agreements have they gotten us into? What's the outcome of those agreements, and what did it lead to? That's where you really know that it's true, that they have been building a new world order, and it's not good. It's not a workable system, which is why the whole world is kind of melting down. It's not just people in our country that are fighting the system that was established. It's regular people all over the world. Mm-hmm. Because this whole world governing system, it really only serves commercial
purposes.
Interests.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Does not
everything
serve
is being done
the people.
For the big corporations and for the executives that run them and the boards and what have you, and the shareholders. And It's not really done for the people. Certainly, we're supposed to have government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But the people are increasingly being cut out of it. It's only a select few. And that's the sad part about this whole thing, Vicky, is that the left and the right can both agree on that. Many times people on the left are very upset at corporations because they can see the corporation the concentration of power in the hands of a select few, the wealthy. And unfortunately, that scenario, that realization, I guess, it lends itself to this whole idea of communism. And so they tend to push further and further toward government control, which is not good either. We want to take back the hands of power. We don't do that by creating some system that concentrates power into the hands of a different group of individuals.
Well, under the whole global system designed for commerce, for trade, what they did is basically to pit the middle class against the poor people, and they tell the poor people that the reason you're poor is because you're oppressed, and that's not really true. It's middle. There's a war on the middle class as well, and they're just trying to hang on. But as you say, this global system,
this
corporations and the shareholders and the CEOs. So they've effectively turned regular people against each other.
Yeah.
And the political leaders, I blame the political leaders because they're the ones that come up with the talking points. And the talking points have always been for the middle class. The welfare queen is out to get your tax dollars. And then for the underclass that don't have jobs, the poor people, they are pointed at the middle class people saying they're keeping you down.
Yeah, and the reality is it's neither. It's the people on the top. Well, I mean, there's something to be said about arguing against, for instance, welfare people who don't want to work.
Yeah, but that's not the point. There always have been lazy people, and there are ways to deal with that. But they've turned that into a political issue.
Yeah.
And actually they have co-opted a lot of those people too, because when Clinton did the welfare reform in the 1990s, rather than a welfare check, what they gave them was a small business with a sweetheart deal between a large corporation and a small business. And that's because the propaganda needs show ponies. Look at the success of this guy. He built this whole thing in his garage. Or look at this welfare mom. She was on welfare.
It reminds me of all of the businesses Obama heralded during his administration. Oh, look at this Solyndra. Hey, this is a model success story. Next thing you know, Solyndra is going under. And there's so many of those we talked about in the past. When all that was going on, he would herald one business after another as a perfect shining example, and then all of a sudden it would fail.
Yeah, as long as they get the government grants and the subsidies on labor and all the government perks, that they're a going concern. But as soon as all that stops, as soon as the time limit runs out, where they don't get those subsidies anymore, then they go under.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the whole idea that you can build an economy on small businesses is just total BS.
Well, I don't have a problem with. Here's the thing: when the government is picking and choosing winners and losers, that is not a free market system.
No, it isn't.
And
absolutely not.
I think everyone should be able to have the opportunities that this country has historically afforded business people. And if you're hardworking and you have a product or a service that people want, then you're going to succeed because you're filling a void. The problem is when that market is being skewed by government people who are manipulating things many times for their own gain. By the way,
well, they've got to take a cut off of it because they are for the international system.
Back up. You Skype got you. They're what?
Oh, they are working for the international commercial system.
Yes.
And they need to get a cut out of it because, if you're think about it this way, if you're just working for a government paycheck and you are facilitating all these large corporations and you see all the money flowing to these small businesses and that are really not real businesses, yeah, you're going to take a cut of it. Somehow either route yourself some small business or route some business to a relative or something, because it corrupts the entire system. Our government doesn't really work for the American people anymore. It works for commerce, for international commerce.
That's right. That's right. I mean, that's what they've done at the State Department around the world. They've promoted business. That's what Marie Harf, remember the former State Department spokesperson who was promoting jobs for jihadis. She took a lot of heat for that. But that is exactly what they're doing there.
Yeah, and she actually did us a big favor. I laughed at it, but she actually did us a big favor in saying that. That was a big clue for everybody.
But they didn't get it. They just thought, she's crazy. She's
that
totally
was the media.
Things.
But
yes.
people that were paying attention got it.
I don't. Yeah, but unfortunately, there's not very many people that are paying attention.
That's true.
I mean, they're paying attention. I shouldn't say they're not paying attention, because many people are paying attention, like you said, to the politics, to the sock puppets. They're watching the puppet show. Okay, it's like when you years ago I was involved in youth ministries, and we put on puppet shows. We did some stuff downtown and things like that, and you put on a show, but there's a message in the show. And I think these people are all watching this puppet show with these politicians, and they're enamored by the show, but they don't look behind things to see the true meaning of it all. And how do you get beyond that point? I mean, you almost have to watch. You almost have to pay attention to what these think tanks are saying. You almost have to pay attention to, not the sock puppets, but the people that have their hands in the sock puppets, and getting them to pay attention to the real people behind the scenes that aren't in the news. Those are the ones that are really making the decisions.
Most people think those kinds of programs are really boring.
They are.
I don't.
Many times they are.
Not to me.
Well, sometimes they can be interesting. Often they are. The stuff they discuss, oh my gosh. Make sure your coffee's brewing. But it's like reading UN documents.
Those kind of shows, because I like to know what's going on.
Well, I do too. But it's where the payoff is when you sit through all this, because a lot of this stuff is the usual. Trump is evil. Just if you're watching it today, they'll make a lot of the same kinds of noises, but the payoff is when further down the line, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours into the meeting presentation, they'll have some gold nugget. It's like, aha, this is where they're going with that.
Yeah.
Often that's the case.
Unfortunately, you got to listen to the hour and a half first.
BS. Yeah. It's like reading UN documents. They're not exactly the most flowery presentation,
That's true. That is hard. That's very hard.
But, if you want to know if you really want to know, that's where you find the information. That's where you find, because you got to listen to the people who are actually implementing the plan.
Yeah.
And increasingly, it's the military-industrial complex, which is why we have a $4.5 trillion budget. Did I say the word? Did I use the word budget, Vicky?
Yeah,
I meant spending bill.
Yeah,
spending bill.
Well, the people in our government are trying to be on top of a system that they can't be on top of, and so. They're just wasting all of our money over in the Middle East trying to create a customs union out of the Middle East, but, that religion gets in the way. They're basically tribal people. There are the different tribes have different variations of the religion, but under the global system, they're trying to make it a single customs union, the same way they did is Canada and Mexico, same way they did to the European Union. And only it's not a workable system because they are not Western cultures.
Yeah.
So,
that's a problem. It's a definite
and it's
problem.
not even working for us because they, with the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Organization that was established in 1989, they brought in China and Russia into that organization, and that is the puppet master for trade for the Pacific. So it's not even working for us, so because those countries are not Western countries.
If it's not working for us, it's probably not designed to work for us. That's the way
which
I see
is
it.
Exactly right. And that's what my latest article is about. It's about
It's about what?
Hong Kong.
Hong Kong. Yeah, and the protesters there. We haven't.
Well, it doesn't have anything to do with the protest. It has to do with an agreement. Well, it goes back initially to a declaration, a UN declaration in 1960, declaring that the colonial powers needed to divest themselves of their former colonies and turn over all power and resources to the indigenous peoples. Okay, and that declaration was proposed by Nikita Khrushchev. You think he might have had an ulterior motive there?
No, of course.
It was a brilliant move, actually.
You mean the guy that pounded his shoe on the on the podium and said, "We will bury you, United States"?
That's the guy. Yep, that's the guy, and he was right, and he pretty much has. But in 1984, Britain started negotiating with China to turn over the British colonies in Asia over to China. And of course, that included Hong Kong. Hong Kong was the economic and manufacturing and trade hub of Asia. And there were a lot of American companies that were invested in there. So what they ultimately decided to do was a deal for one country, two systems.
Mm-hmm. It's just what they did with Taiwan, too.
Exactly. They would treat Hong Kong as a special administrative region for commerce. And China would retain authority over foreign affairs and defense, but Hong Kong would continue to operate independently. And that's where they got us, is through that one country, two systems, where the system that was under the administrative trade area, under one system of government, that is managed through Hong Kong, the trading system. So that basically bifurcated the nation state and then into the rest of the country. So in our country, what that meant is that all of the economic centers of our country are following the policies of APEC to harmonize regulatory systems, to facilitate international commerce with open borders and free movement of people and all the rest of it. those are the policies of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Organization. Okay, so now if you just think of a country, if you take and separate out all of your economic power centers and then leave the rest of the country to fend for themselves, how does that comport with what's happened to our country?
Well, that's exactly what's happening to our country, because we have all these international zones where you have like an airport or something. That any place there's an airport is an international zone of cooperation. I forget exactly what they're called, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. I've always called them inland ports.
They are, yes.
But you're right. They're kind of like welcoming centers for foreign investment, EB-5s. Okay, now here's something really tricky that they did with Hong Kong. They Mitch McConnell in 1992, he's the one that wrote the U.S. Hong Kong Policy Act. And what they agreed to do was to honor visas issued by Hong Kong. Well, what they did is they provided a gateway for the communist Chinese to be sheep-dipped through Hong Kong to come into the United States.
Yep, they're laundering people.
That's money. So money comes in as if it's from Hong Kong, but actually it's just a front for communist Chinese mone.
Yeah,
and it was Mitch McConnell and his wife, Chairman Chow, Elaine Chow, who came from Taiwan, but her father, they actually came from communist China, and they moved over to Taiwan during the revolution, and then immigrated over here, and magically he starts a shipping company. Now, where in the world did a poor immigrant escaping communist China come up with the money for a shipping company? I wonder.
And why, of all things, would it be a shipping company? You know, when we got all this free trade stuff going on, and certainly for many, many years, our store shelves have been filled with communist Chinese products, and the biggest export we've had is empty containers going back to China to be refilled.
That's right. Well, yeah, I mean, they just set it up to bleed our country of everything.
Do you know what his shipping company does? I'm assuming it involves shipping stuff over here from China. That would make sense, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, I'm sure they ship from Taiwan and Hong Kong.
Yeah.
But everything is laundered through Hong Kong, so there you go. At least it was.
I was blown away. I mean, and there was a book called China's Trojan Horses. I forget the author's name. Red Chinese Soldiers, Sailors, Spies Occupy America's Homeland. And he had pictures of the OOCL, the Orient, what is it, Orient? Anyway, the China Ocean Shipping Company, and OOCL. You know, CNOOC. Was it CNOOC?
CNOOC, that's the oil company, yeah.
That's okay. Anyway, the China Ocean Shipping Company and OOCL. Anyway, all these empty containers that are coming in regularly, and that's still going on. Now, it may be a little bit stifled because of the tariffs right now, but a lot of this stuff is still going on. You know, there's another thing I found that was kind of interesting lately. This swine flu, African swine flu outbreak. I found a news article that there were drones flying over this area in China where they're actually somebody with drones is dropping contaminated pigs or something, contaminated meat, in other words, from these drones, and spreading the African swine flu. And I shouldn't laugh; it's not funny, but it makes me wonder who in the world might do such a thing. You know, at a time when we're in competition with, I hate to be conspiratorial about it, but at a time when we're in competition with China, they never fingered the State Department or anything like that. But I just got to thinking, well, this is kind of like what our State Department would do.
Yeah, it kind of is.
I don't know. I'll have to dig up that article. Maybe I got it somewhere in my stack of stuff here, but I don't know. It struck me as a little bit odd that would be going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well,
a lot of these outbreaks.
It's hard to say. It would be a false flag kind of thing, because you know what I was thinking the other day. I wonder what the difference is between ISIL, and MS-13.
Well,
because
probably the religion, I guess.
They're basically agitators who are coming in and trying to, they're agitating. But what they do is that they cause the local officials to circle the wagons, right? Mm-hmm. And to set up these terrorist watch systems and all of that stuff. Well, the terrorist watch systems are part of the APEC plan.
Yeah.
And so is pandemic planning.
Yep. I have no argument with that. The Wahhabists, and it's just like a different gang, but they certainly adhere to the most extreme Muslim ideologies.
Yeah, they're gangs for disruption, and the disruption causes change, and the change is the police state.
There you go. So that's exactly right. Very, very well said. Tell you what, we got the top of the hour or bottom of the hour break. Stay with us, folks. We'll be back in a moment. Vicky Davis, I'm Darren Weeks, and we'll be back in just a second. Stay with us.
Where the spooks go to find out what's really going on. This is Govern America.
Tonight,
Welcome back to the broadcast. This is Govern America. GovernAmerica.com is the website for the show. That's GovernAmerica.com. The toll-free number is 844-646-8376 if you'd like to call in. 844-6-GOVERN. That's 844-646-8376. Or you can call 610-600-1776. That's 610-600-1776. And my email address is radio@governamerica.com. And Vicky, you want to give your information out?
Yeah, my website is thetechnocratictyranny.com, and my email address is eyeswideoopen @channelingreality.com.
Yeah, and so you can touch bases there with us there, and also the chat room is open at chat.governamerica.com. If I can spit it out today. It's one of those weird shows that's kind of in between Christmas and New Year, and so it's a little bit of kind of a strange time.
Well, before we leave the topic of international trade, let me just drop this Christmas present onto everybody. A little late, but I'm getting there. With the Hong Kong China agreement, what was behind that was the British system of empire. The British, how the British Empire was built on a maritime system of control of ports. And what they did was to globalize that system through the APEC.
Mm-hmm.
And in our law, our entire country is defined as customs territory. So that meant, they could pretty much bring this British system of
maritime law.
Yeah,
into
the United States, not just at the ports, but through the interstate highway system under the guise of international commerce.
Yeah, and that's where you have
so it's really the British Commonwealth. They call it the Commonwealth of Nations now, but it's still run by the British Foreign Secretary with the Queen at the head of it. So that's what it is, globalization of the British system of, there's a word for it, mercantilism. Yeah.
And don't we want to be under the authority of the Queen?
Yeah, really.
Yeah, don't we want to be under the authority of a monarchy? You know, we fought a revolution in this country to get rid of monarchy, to be self-determined, to have our own destiny as determined by us and God, predominantly. And we've reverted, haven't we?
Yes. Now the lords and ladies, that have their empire, their own little empires to support the big empire. Mm-hmm. So that's it.
We were talking earlier about
the system is. It's the British system under the Admiralty system of ports.
Yeah, and Admiralty,
control of the ports for commerce.
Admiralty law governs all maritime matters. And this is why we have the Inland Port Network, listeners. The Inland Port Network is a network of ports that are international. And this is what we're talking about here when we, as a part of NAFTA, back years ago, we were fighting and trying to expose, and but many in the Patriot community, if I can use that word, we're trying to expose these North American Super Corridor Coalition. This highway, international highway, but there were multiple highways, but they would go from north to south, and I-35 was a major artery, as I recall, and it branched off, and I-94, which runs through here, my neck of the woods, was a part of it. I noticed, Vicky, that they're widening I-94 now, and it's not quite 6 football lanes wide, but they are widening it. And I predicted this years ago because of this North American super highway system, and now I'm wondering if this is the reason why. I imagine it probably is.
Oh, I have no doubt.
Because these plans don't go away.
I probably spent more time studying our transportation system, which is a really bizarre thing to do, study a transportation system when you're not engaged in transportation. But that was the Trojan horse, is our transportation system, because they ported some of maritime law, Admiralty law, into the GATT agreements, Generalized Agreements on Trade and Tariffs. And Article 5 of the GATT agreement calls for landlocked countries to be able to participate in international commerce via a system of ports going port to port. So as long as commerce is moving along from international port to international port, or economic center to economic center, it is still considered an international trade. And so they turned our country system into shipping lanes for international commerce. Now,
you described it in one of your articles as a land bridge.
Pardon me?
I said you described it in one of your articles as a land bridge.
It is a land bridge. Yes, they're using our interstate highway system, creating a land bridge, making our country, breaking it up essentially by turning our interstate highway systems into shipping lanes with international ports at the economic centers, And all of this is being done out in the open, but you have to have studied the whole system from the ground up to understand what it is that they're doing exactly. And it's breaking up our nation state, because that is the idea. It's to disintegrate the nation state system.
And the thing that bothers me, you had people like Jerome Corsi out there exposing many of these things in Lou Dobbs, but Jerome Corsi, after exposing it, he came out when they officially announced it was killed. He said, "All right, it's dead," and it was never really dead. I mean, they never really kill it. I mean, they continued to harmonize the regulations and everything. The cooperation of different programs continued to go on underneath the surface.
Right. Well, I don't think it was Jerome Corsi's original research that
no, but I'm just saying
even though he
did a good job at
anybody else, he got the information about these zones from Amanda Teagarden of
Yes.
OK Safe, and Amanda Teagarden got it from me.
Yeah.
So
it created a very big splash. I'm
right,
just saying
it wasn't his research, and you're right. He wrote his book and then he buried it, moved on.
That's the problem right there. That's I wasn't trying to give him credit for the research. My point is that he should have never said, he should have never taken their word for it that they had killed it, because they never kill it. They never kill anything. And I've watched as they've continued to go on with these agreements
in the mainstream, which Jerome Corsi is, even though he tries to pretend he isn't. But their function is to serve as a diversion. It's kind of like, they discovered the communist Chinese coming in through Mexico, so we got to set up a diversion here, So he wrote his book and said, pronounced it all done. It's all done, all over.
Yeah.
Go shopping.
Well, I don't know who Jerome Corsi is. I honestly, I haven't ever trusted him. Derry Brownfield seemed to like him pretty well, but, the problem is that when you have these people, we need people to get the folks stirred up, and that's what he did to a certain degree of success. I mean, he made this, even Lou Dobbs was on there on CNN of all places talking about this. But my point is, where is the opposition now? And we're on the threshold of this USMCA being ratified. This is kind of like a damned if we do, damned if we don't type of situation. Because if they ratify the USMCA, we go further into this thing. If they don't ratify it, well, we're still under NAFTA. Right. And so either way, we're in a regional system.
That's why people need to understand the basis for the whole system, because when you understand what the whole system is and where it derived from, the obvious thing to do is to get out of it. You got to get out of it. If you want to save your country, get out of it. Cancel NAFTA, rebuild our economy, rebuild our laws concerning our economy, and shut down these multinationals that are destroying our country. The whole system is destroying our country. And it doesn't matter. I mean, when I was growing up, the idea of government creating jobs was unheard of. Government did not create jobs. They didn't even start talking like that until sometime in the mid 90s, as our economy, probably around 1996 when the stock market took off. But people in our country started losing jobs. That's when the government started talking about jobs. And it's obscene for a country that thinks that they are a capitalist country to have their government talk about the government creating jobs. I mean, we don't
want,
you want to knock on somebody's head and say, McFly, do you get it, McFly? Government creating jobs?
Yeah, well, the government creates jobs where you go to work for the government, and there have been many jobs that the government has created that way. But the problem is they're like a parasitical tick, a leech, sucking off the people. I mean, we don't want government jobs. Because
like
government
giving you a
jobs...
blood transfusion with your own bad blood.
Yeah, exactly.
So...
Yeah, and then you come out with reports like the Inspector General report with the Comey and the Corney. You know, that caller called into the show at the end of the show last week, and that little tidbit totally flew over my head until later on I was going through the chat room, and I noticed what I think it was Murr Bailey had posted in the chat room about this weird letter thing. And I thought, oh, this. You know, I dismissed it at first until I saw.
It did sound kind of weird, didn't it?
Until I saw a link over to RBN. I thought, okay, well, if the RBN posted something, maybe so I decided to go over to RBN's website and look and see what they had posted. Well, it turns out it was referring to the Inspector General report, where they said that the M in the word Comey, in Comey's last name, in the Inspector General report, was not actually an M. It was actually an R and an N running together to form the M. And I thought, well, why would they do that? I thought, well, here, I've got a copy of the Inspector General report right here on the website. I'll just go there and do a search and see if that's true. So I went there and did a search for Comey. Nothing pops up. I did a search for Corney, and a bunch of hits happened. And I thought, well, this is true. I'm like, why would they do this? And so, I was at that point, I think, after looking at this, that I called you up, and I said, hey, I got something weird to show you. And we spent over an hour, I think, on the phone talking about this situation, trying to figure out why in the world would they ever do this. And it turns out, and I think you and I were kind of leaning toward it being some kind of translation thing with the image, because they produce, see if I get this right, they produce the initial document in paper form, then they have to create an image of the document as the original PDF. Then from that image document, to make it searchable, they create text. And to do that, they use some kind of, they got a name for it, and I forget. But it's some kind of software that recognizes the letters and translates the letters into actual text. And I guess that...
They should be going directly from the printed document, though, to a PDF version of it, to an image copy of it. But this happens a lot when you have a printed document, you print it out, and then you run it back through your printer, imaging it to translate the text into a searchable document.
But the problem here is that it only seemed to happen with the word Comey. So I was thinking last week that could it be possible that they were assuming they were planning on people not reading the document, but only doing a search for Comey, because there are other instances of RN that don't become M's, and there are other instances of M's that are really M's. I mean, attorney, the word attorney, for instance, that never, that's an R and an N. It doesn't become an M, and there are many instances of the letter M that are not RN. I mean, you can search for them, and they come up with no problem.
Yeah.
So, what gives?
I thought about doing an analysis on the document and looking for other combinations. I mean, you'd have to go through it almost word by word, looking for other combinations that didn't convert properly in order to be able to say that absolutely. But yeah, I really don't think it was a mistake, because people that work with documents and images all the time, they know about this problem of conversion from.
And the government does work with documents all the time, no question about that.
Yeah. Yeah,
They
so
produce paper.
it's kind of hard to imagine that they are so careless that they didn't double check.
Well, now there's Real Clear Politics. Mm-hmm. They have also a wing or a division called Real Clear Investigations. They picked this up. It was kind of because here's the thing. It sounds like crack pottery. And I mean, I even now I feel like why were we even talking about this? Except that it is a real thing, and I was thinking about this. In fact, I was explaining this all to my daughter the other day, and I said it's almost like they want people to spend their time talking about this type of stuff rather than actually talking about what's really in the report. Because what's actually in the report is proof that the government used illegal means. They used completely bogus information. They withheld exculpatory information to get a warrant, and they included fraudulent information, namely using the fraudulent, thoroughly discredited dossier to obtain a warrant, and more than one time, more than one warrant, in a secret FISA court to spy on an innocent person. That's the issue. That's what's really in the report. And that should be explosive. That should worry every American. But we've become so accustomed to these abuses, Vicky, that we don't. It's like we're numb to it now. We're slapped in the face. We're punched in the face constantly.
On this situation, though, it's kind of like administrative trickery. And it probably was intentional because he put 3 chapters of boilerplate before he actually got into the important stuff. Well, you throw in boilerplate just to make your report bigger. They know, within government, they know all of the laws and the rules and everything else by which they do their study. You don't have to put that in every single report, but every report that they've produced for the people so far, they throw that in there, and people burn out after about 100 pages, so they never get to the important stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Real Clear Investigations regarding this weird thing with the letters. There's a guy, let's see, I'm going to try to, Eric Felton. He wrote on Christmas Eve, "We know a few things for sure, beginning with the fact that quiet changes have been made in the blockbuster report on FBI spying abuse released 2 weeks ago by the Department of Justice Office of Inspector General. We also know that while the IG has acknowledged many little revisions, one of the most significant has happened without official notice or comment. The odd and mysterious case of Comey versus Corney." Now, you remember that I had a different version of that document than you did. I mean, I pulled the one that originally off of our website that we had, and that had no hits for Comey. And then you went to the Department of Justice and pulled down the one from there, which I thought I had gotten mine from the Department of Justice, but I don't know now. Anyway, they looked identical. But when you pulled down the latest copy from the IG's website at the Department of Justice, it had some hits, but not all of them.
Right, only had 57 hits.
Well, there were some appearances of the word Comey, and anyway, apparently that report had been changed. This is what he's saying here. He says, "We know a few things for sure, beginning with the fact that quiet changes have been made in the blockbuster report on FBI spying abuse released 2 weeks ago by the Department of Justice, Office of Inspector General. We also know that while the IG has acknowledged many little revisions, one of the most significant has happened without official notice or comment. The odd and mysterious case of Comey versus Corney." Before diving into that, as a reporter who spent years covering the whole Russia, FBI, FISA, Steele, Orr, Simpson, Comey et al. Gate story, let me begin by admitting the obvious. It is crazy-making. The regular occurrence of improbable strangeness is enough to make one think that those with he made a reference to aluminum curtains, the tinfoil hat thing. Anyway, take the most recent baffling curiosity, the fact that the name Comey, as in former FBI Director James Comey, didn't appear once in the 476 pages of the report released on December 9th on the FBI's abuse of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, or as it seemed. Sure, there are many references to the former FBI director in it, but search for Comey, and your computer tells you that there is no such word in the document. By contrast, search for Corney, C-O-R-N-E-Y, and you get nearly 150 results. Results that all look like Comey. So what gives? Perhaps it is just the optical character recognition problem. A PDF is not a word processing document made up of so many individual letters. Instead, a PDF is an image, often an image of text. To search an image of text, computers use OCR to analyze the shapes. Okay, so we've already been through that. He says, so could the Corney Conundrum be an OCR problem? Nope, is the emphatic answer that some people writing on conspiracy Reddit say. The argument that follows is compelling. The poster counted up 23,851 M's, that's what I was just saying, because we did the same thing on the phone, and found that only the only ones represented as RN were those in Comey. Also, there are some 2,000 instances of RN in the document, but only in Corney Comey is the RN combination mistaken for M. So they offer examples of some of the many words in the Horowitz report where the computer has no trouble making out R and N without confusing the two together as an M.
That's outstanding that they did that. That's what I was talking about we needed to do to be able to actually
prove
for doing it. Yeah.
Yes. It's also enough to make one agree with the person writing on Reddit Conspiracy's conclusion that someone has doctored the text in an intentional conspiracy to shield James Comey from keyword searches. This might be done. A graphic designer who does typesetting for publications tells Real Clear Investigations by including an invisible layer of searchable text under the unsearchable visible image of the text. For example, the visible layer would have an image that looks like the name Comey, but under it, in the invisible layer, is the text Corney. But what would be the point? And unfortunately, I'm going to have to take the break. So we'll get back into this here in just a second. Stay with us, folks. Hour number 2 is straight ahead. Don't go away.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
The councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. Hour number 2 here. Vicky Davis is here as well. It continues to be the 28th of December 2019, the final day, the final show of 2019, as we're looking forward to bidding this year adieu and the new year welcoming it in and all the exciting things that 2020 brings. Oh boy, more craziness, more insanity.
It is going to be crazy, too.
And we were talking at the end of the last hour, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it's interesting whenever they do something like this, that, this was one of those baffling head scratchers. Why?
Well, it's a
mystery.
Good heads up for people that when you are reading anything coming from the Department of Justice, you now need to check it and see what kind of games they've played in the document.
Yeah, and also rather enlightening is the fact that these things are living documents. They're not, you get the impression when they put one of these out that, well, that's it. But no, it's evolving. And they put out multiple versions of the same document.
It's history. It's history, and it's being messed with. Okay,
yes,
if you want to get right down to it.
Exactly, and the old changes go down the memory hole. This Real Clear Investigations, he asks, what's the point? I rather doubt the U.S. Attorney John Durham is going to be fuzzled by a trick keyword search. Chances are he will have read the complete Horowitz report and seen all the passages that reference James Comey, even if the Corney confuses the computer. If there has been a conspiracy, it has failed, perhaps because of the conspiracy theorists who have been drawing attention to the strange spelling of Comey in the digital version of the Horowitz report. But most important, the document has been changed. And that's really probably the biggest takeaway from all of this. He says,
it's very significant. I mean, people are... they're kind of trying to minimize it in a way, but it's really, really important because that's history. Mm-hmm. And who does any online legal work should take heed that your text recognition software can be manipulated, and your contract or whatever it is that you have sent or that you have sent electronically can be modified. Mm-hmm. So in this case, it just happened to be for a search, but there's no reason they can't insert a word "not" in a document, or there's all kinds of mischief you can do if your intent is to do
fraud.
Fraud, yeah.
He says. Most importantly, the document's been changed. He says, Sunday evening, I went to show my brother-in-law the Comey-Corney effect. And what did I find? But that it had disappeared. He says, when the report was initially released 2 weeks ago, it was dated at the bottom of the cover page, December 2019. It now reads December 2019, parentheses, revised. The revisions are listed on a new page before the executive summary. They are mostly persnickety, minute changes meant to make the document, very strictly speaking, correct. For example, the OIG states on pages blah, 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 we changed the phrase before and after to both during and after the time. On some 4 different pages, the OIG changed the solid had no discussion to a squishy did not recall any discussion or mention. And if you check the page 370, you'll find that assertion has been replaced with statement. See, I don't like this. I say when you put out the report, that's the report. Now if you want to put out another document, you put out a supplemental, like appendix or something, or an amendment to the original document. I don't like this business where we're changing the actual document. Because if I go to the Justice Department, I get a report. I want that to be the final report. You've had how many millions of dollars of taxpayer money to produce this dang thing, and you can't get it right before you release it?
Yeah, it's another underlying thing is what a way to mess up a country is to have your insurgents work at the administrative level or the janitorial level, that has total access to the building. You remember that Edward Snowden said he worked as a security guard. I mean, what a way to bring about a coup on a country. It's not the high level people, it's the lower level people you need to be looking at, because there's nothing that prevents a janitorial company from hiring somebody who is really, really smart and a computer whiz.
I don't think these are lower level people. I think they get their orders from on high.
Well, no, I guarantee. Well, on high where though? On high inside the government or on high outside the government?
Well, that ultimately, that's a good point.
The Barr would say, do this tricky little thing in the document. He probably would never occur to him.
Well, Horowitz is, he's a part of the system.
Again,
yeah, he's a part of the system. I said when this thing came out, I said it was a limited hangout. And I do think that they are protecting Comey. I do think ultimately, this is like, this whole thing is stupid, really, on one level, because what do you hope to accomplish other than maybe getting people to talk about this rather than what's actually in the report? But I don't think ultimately it matters, because Comey's not going to be held accountable. Now, I hope I'm wrong on that, but I really don't think I will be.
Yeah, no, I don't think
he's too high up.
I don't think that was done, for the conspiracy theory world. I don't think it was done for that purpose.
Now, they may, I don't doubt that somebody will go to jail or somebody will face charges or something, and it'll probably be some poor paper pusher in some office somewhere. That's usually how they do it. Just like with the Epstein thing, they found the prison guards and, you weren't doing your job. You weren't making your rounds. Why, you were searching the internet when you should have been keeping an eye on them. And they blame the prison guards and we know that Bill Barr made a visit to the prison prior to Epstein's demise, if in fact he even got killed.
His alleged demise.
Yeah, his alleged demise. Thank you. Anyway, finishing this thing up. Far more significant is an unheralded change to the document. The Corney-Comey strangeness has largely been fixed. With the new revised version, my computer now only recognizes 2 Corneys as Comeys, and nearly 20 Comeys are properly identified by the keyword search function. And yet, though clearly some sort of change has been made affecting word searches, the Corney Conundrum goes entirely without mention. I'm sorry. And entirely without mention. They never even talk about that in the listing of changes and revisions in the document. Real Clear Investigations contacted Horowitz's office to ask about the revision, but were told that anyone who could speak to the issue was out of the office for the holiday week, conveniently so. The revision has replaced the original report at the OIG website, and with it has gone easy access to the document at the center of the strangeness. Well, we got a copy on our website, but just because there isn't easy access doesn't mean there isn't access. It turns out the Comey-Corney effect resisted eradication. Each Inspector General has his or her own website. It was at the Department of Justice OIG site that the Horowitz report was posted. With much fanfare on December 9th, it was at that same website that, with rather less fanfare, indeed no hoopla at all, that the original report was quietly replaced with the revised version. But for those connoisseurs of conspiracy who would like to peruse the IG report in all of the Comey-Corney glory, there may be no need to consult the all-knowing Internet Wayback Machine. Though each IG Inspector General has a website, the federal government maintains a catch-all site, oversight.gov, that makes available the reports published by every department's IG. The Horowitz report was published there 2 weeks ago, and there it remained, for a while at least, untouched by the revisions that tidied up the original. Anyway, so...
What a mess. What it should say to everybody is that there is no replacement for hard copy paper.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes. Otherwise, things might end up going down the old Orwellian memory hole.
Yep.
And really, this whole thing really is kind of Orwellian, isn't it?
I don't know how you could get more Orwellian.
It's very bizarre. And anyway, turning a corner. I spent way more time on that than I intended to. But I do think it's important. Because, like you said, I don't think it was an accident. Just simply because it only occurred with that one word.
Yeah.
Very weird. Anyway, we, in all of this Corney, and, Russiagate stuff, it centers around what appears to be an emerging new tactic, Vicky. And that new tactic is to use the legal system, to use the justice system, if we can even use that word justice anymore, to go after political opponents. Iffy. What was it? Obama was in office. There was a big scandal where he was using the IRS to go after his political enemies. You remember that?
Oh yeah, definitely do.
And nobody ever talked about impeaching Obama for that. I mean, that's one to me is one of the most egregious things one can do. I know people who were very vocal during that time. I won't say who, but people very close to me who were very vocal politically at that time, and they got audited by the IRS. So this and there were hearings in Congress about it, but they went nowhere. And was there ever even a mention of the word impeachment? Maybe among conservative people, but it never happened. Certainly not among politicians. That's corruption.
It was more like going after the IRS. That woman, I forget what her name was, but the one that was head of the department that approved applications for 501c3s. Mm-hmm. She was the one that Republicans were going after because she was the one that was disapproving all of the 501c3 applications from Republicans.
But the question is that how high did this go? And
Lois. Her name was Lois.
Yeah, exactly. Lois
Lerner?
Lerner, yes. That's it.
Yeah, okay.
You got it. Very good. Because I don't think I would have been able to recall that. Yes, Lois Lerner. That's a scandal, and here's the thing, the buck stops with the man at the top. How these are the types of things that they've done. If this happened under the Trump administration, can you imagine? I mean, people would be having strokes.
Yeah, that's true.
And all he did was, and again, not a fan of Trump. I won't be voting for Trump. Trump threw us under the bus on the gun control issue. Trump threw us under the bus under many issues. The trade thing, the USMCA. Very unhappy with Trump. Okay? That being said, the man is the duly elected president of the United States. And the people that voted for Trump deserve to have him finish out his term. And that's just the bottom line of it. We got an election right around the corner. If you don't like Trump, you have an opportunity to vote him out. But this, he asked Zelensky, he asked about corruption. He asked him to look into as president, you are sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. In that Constitution, one of the requirements for the executive branch of government is to ensure that the laws of the land be faithfully executed. Now, how can you do that if you're not able to ask about corruption? And when you have Joe Biden, who's now refusing to testify before Congress, that's the latest thing. He was asked if he's subpoenaed to go before Congress, if he would actually go and do it, and he said no. What has he got to hide?
Right.
He knows what he's got to hide. All those damning things that he said in the past have come back to haunt him now.
Well, you know what bothers me? I mean, this is a potentially criminal investigation. I mean, it should be a criminal investigation because the facts in the case don't add up. Nobody pays a person with no qualifications $80-some-odd thousand a month. Nobody does that.
Exactly. I mean, this is such blatant quid pro quo, such blatant corruption staring you right in the face. It's kind of like if a law enforcement officer is investigating a case of mafia crime, okay? Let's say money laundering. Let's say murder. Let's say human trafficking. You name some serious crime that a law enforcement officer could investigate. And let's say he's going after and asking people, doing the usual things that an investigator would do when they're investigating a crime. And the prosecutor comes out and charges the law enforcement officer for investigating the crime instead of actually going after the real criminal. Let's say they gather all this evidence and then they present it to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor says, "Okay, you know what? I'm charging you." That's kind of what's going on here. You have Trump trying to uphold the law in this case, and there may be other problems that you have with Trump. Certainly, there's problems. When he bombed Syria, I had a problem with that. When he went after Venezuela, I don't like communist countries, but I really don't like foreign meddling. And you know what? Venezuela is Venezuela's problem. If they're happy down there being good little commies, as long as they stay in their place, and they'll come trying to bring it up here, then I don't care. Whatever. You do whatever you want down there. Just keep it down there. I don't want the United States spread around the world, intermingling and interfering, because we can't afford this. This is bankrupting our country. Go ahead.
Well, and that's exactly what happened with Russia and what's happened with Ukraine. And if you look at the global system of mercantilism under the British model, probably what Hunter Biden is doing falls under the system of international trade. It's a different system than under our domestic laws. And that's the problem with this whole global system. There are two systems in effect, and two sets of laws in effect. And I'm not sure that there are any laws against what Hunter Biden is doing. So, I mean, that's the kind of problem that one country, two systems creates.
Well, it's
because from our point of view, we think we only have one system of government, and it applies to all citizens of government, and that's not really true under this whole global trading system. It's not really true.
I went down a bunny trail there, and I didn't mean to. The point being is that all of this Russiagate stuff and all of the impeachment stuff really centers around where I was going was that it appears to be an evolving tactic, Vicky, and I think you know where I'm going with this. Mm-hmm. There is a situation right now in Washington State where they have a state representative, Matt Shea, who has been involved with the Bundys. Remember the standoff in Nevada at the Bundy Ranch when the federal government were gathering. They put their snipers up on the hillside overlooking the Bundy Ranch. See, that's what people don't know, is they had snipers up on the hills. The media focused on the fact that, Cliven Bundy, he wouldn't pay his grazing fees or whatever. The real issue here is that the FBI had snipers up on top of the hillside overlooking. I mean, they were gathering for another Waco-style standoff.
Massacre.
Absolutely. Just like the Branch Davidian type of situation that happened back, 93 that happened? I believe it was 1993, if I'm not mistaken. They murdered those people. Janet Reno has blood on her hands. Bill Clinton, who was in office at the time, has blood on his hands. 17 little children and women and men. There were 17 children, but there were also women and men in addition to that. A whole bunch of people who were minding their own business, but they had been after these people for a long time. They had made multiple calls to Child Protective Services trying to find anything on them, and they found nothing. They went away empty-handed. They could have gotten the leader of the thing. I'm blanking on his name now. David Koresh. They could have gotten him when he went out to town, anywhere, at any time, because he regularly went to town. But they didn't. They waited until, they just brought it, they planned in advance to murder these people. And Cliven Bundy was aware. He was aware of what had happened down in Waco. And he sees these snipers on the hillside. What would you do, folks, if you saw the government gathering to massacre you and your family? Would you sit back and take it? Would you sit back and wait, or would you sound the alarm? And that's exactly what he did. That's why they called in the militia. It's because they didn't want to be massacred. And so these people came in, and they took a stand. And if that's not why you have Second Amendment rights in the first place, because you don't want to be massacred. This wasn't something that was an act of aggression. This was an act of defense. And anyway, Matt Shea had evidently went down there too. And
Matt Shea is a representative from the state of Washington.
Yes.
Did you say that?
Earlier I did, yes.
Okay.
But they came out with this report. Now, I guess it was the Legislative Assembly there. And what was the report like? How big was it?
Over 100 pages, about 108 pages or so.
I read part of it, and I didn't get through the whole thing. But they make all these allegations, and they use sources from the Southern Poverty Law Center.
The report reads as if it was written by the Southern Poverty Law Center.
It probably was, although it's
anybody who calls himself a patriot, you should know this. If you call yourself a patriot to the government and to the woman that wrote this report's former FBI agent who opened a consulting firm because it's so convenient for the government.
So convenient
outside to do the things that they can't do inside the government. Mm-hmm. Okay, but she wrote this report, and it's basically a political hit piece.
Yeah.
They're calling him, Matt Shea, a domestic terrorist.
That's right. And they claim that he's organized a bunch of things like this. The whole Bundy. Well, he went down there. I guess he went down there. I guess that's true. But Ammon Bundy says he didn't even know Matt Shea at the time. And then there is an allegation, and I do say allegation in the report, that he helped to organize the occupation at Malheur, the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. Now, I don't know if that's true. I think Ammon Bundy says it's not true. But
it does. The person who wrote this report, it's a political hit piece.
Yes,
that's what it is.
Well, and it's worse. And it's worse than just smearing him, because they've taken this report where they try to lay out a case based upon Southern Poverty Law Center sources, Wikipedia, and other left-wing sources. Now, they do have some sources where they go to their actual websites and videos or whatever, too. But a lot of the sources are from the Southern Poverty Law Center or groups like Hate Watch, which is People for the American Way. That's in there as well. these are political enemies of somebody like Matt Shea.
Right.
So they're trying to force Matt Shea, who has a wide support for the people in his district.
He's very popular in his district.
They're trying to force him out, but it's worse than that, Vicky, because as you know, they've sent this report to the FBI. They're trying to get this man criminally prosecuted.
Yeah, as a domestic terrorist. And why? Because he supports his constituents. Yeah. And he's not a left-wing radical.
Yeah, but and the problem is it's not just the Democrats that are doing this. It is his own party, the Republican caucus.
They're all just a bunch of spineless. What would you call them? Eunuchs, spineless eunuchs.
Yeah.
Who the minute the left points at somebody, they all back away. Like scared little girls.
Yeah.
They won't stand up to these leftists, and they won't support their own.
Well,
and
you don't want to have to explain to voters.
That's why the Democrats win.
You don't want to have to explain to voters at election time that you supported your fellow Republican, because that domestic terrorist. Anyway, we got to take the break. We'll be back.
Where the spooks go to find out what's really going on. This is Govern America.
And we're back here halfway through the show. Melody Hallett will be joining us at the top of the next hour if everything goes as planned. We're talking about this situation with Matt Shea, this Washington State representative who's being targeted by opposition groups, including people in his own party, who are going right along with this domestic terrorist designation. I've got a backgrounder report from, I think it's local Channel 4, on the controversy.
Monday, after an independent investigation said he engaged in domestic terrorism, Spokane Valley Representative Matt Shea is defiant, saying he will not resign. Thanks for joining us. I'm Aaron Luna. Nia Wong has the night off. The independent investigation accuses Shea of radicalizing others against the United States for his own political gain. This story is already getting national coverage, but not many people have followed it closer than Leah Satilli, a journalist in the Northwest. For years now, she's been uncovering the details seen in that 108-page report through her podcast called Bundyville. Satilli says the story started for her with the takeover of an Oregon wildlife refuge in 2016, a takeover Matt Shea is accused of leading. Despite those accusations, Shea's supporters still stand by him.
I think people who still support Matt Shea are basically supporting white supremacy.
That leaves many wondering what's next for Shea as members of his own party call for his resignation. Washington and Idaho are two of the 19 states that can recall an elected official. But, Mayor, it looks like there are some hoops they'd have to go through before that can happen.
That's right, Aaron. It's similar to that of an impeachment of a United States president. But it's also worth mentioning only one Washington state lawmaker has ever been removed from office in the 130 years of the state legislature. Much like the impeachment of a president in the United States, removing a lawmaker from office would require a 2/3 majority vote. No lawmakers have said yet if they plan to start that process, but the people of Washington could remove him as well. Washington is one of 19 states where citizens could recall an elected official so long as there were a certain amount of petitions signed by voters. Shea could also be removed if he is charged and convicted of a felony. 4 News Now went to Shea's office and reached out for comment, but he didn't get back to us. Now it'll be interesting to see how this plays out as some lawmakers called for Shea's resignation as soon as the report was made public. Today, Eastern Washington's most prominent Republican, Kathy McMorris Rogers, agreed with House Minority Leader J.T. Wilcox, who said yesterday that Shea should resign. McMorris Rogers saying in part, "I believe Representative Wilcox is doing the right thing for the Republican caucus. I have repeatedly condemned extremism, no matter its source, and have made clear the violence it inspires has no place here in Eastern Washington."
So they're blackballing this guy. Now, I've got Ammon Bundy's response to these charges, but do you have anything you wanted to say before I play that, Vicky?
Yeah, I wanted to say that this report that this former FBI agent did on Matt Shea, it's like the Trump dossier.
Yes.
It's filled with accusations without any real proof of anything. She's just making accusations. And she's basically saying, we don't like you. And all of the Republicans that are standing, fellow Republicans, they should take heed, because what this is doing is using the legal system against your political adversary. Here you have a guy who is a real patriot standing up for the Constitution. Standing up. This is exactly what you want your elected officials to do. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is what's so hard to get elected officials to do, is to stand for the Constitution, to stand for the restoration of our country and the rights of the people. You know, that little idiot in that report, oh, if you support him, why? You're supporting white supremacy. What has this got to do with skin color? Right. You know, well, that's all they got. They're a bunch of idiots. What Matt Shea did is that he went out to find out for himself what was going on, to see it for himself. You mean he wanted to make an informed choice, an informed decision? Yeah, he was listening to his constituents, and he was representing them. As did some other Republican representatives from Idaho, and now they're going after those Idaho representatives. Yeah, and that's exactly where this is going. That is exactly, and what it is, it's the left using our legal system to take out their political opponents. The report, that's precisely what it is. Was dated December 1st, if I recall correctly. They waited nearly over 3 weeks, I think. Wasn't it? They waited they waited a few weeks to release the report because it coincided perfectly with Donald Trump's impeachment. So this was an orchestrated release of this report. They could have released it on the 1st of January when it was completed, but they didn't do that. So the parallels are there. What's happening on a national level is also happening on a state level as well. They're going after people who stand. You know what? And there are other associations that support Matt Shea and those people, and the association is the smaller Cattlemen's Association. I think it's called RCAF, because the big Cattlemen's Association is totally all in for this international trade agenda. Because they're all in favor, they're in bed with the corporations, the big corporations. That's right. The big ag industry. So any representatives that look to help the regular people and the really small businesses, you know, which there are cattle ranches that are small business, you know, relatively speaking to the big cattle producers. Any representative that seeks to help the smaller ones, they become an enemy of the state. I mean, it blows my mind that that this is happening in our country, but it's because of this international trading system and the multinational corporations and foreign governments, by the way, foreign governments that are making war on the economy. Mm-hmm. So, all right. Anyway, off my soapbox. No, you're fine. This is Ammon Bundy's response to these allegations. Because you remember, Ammon Bundy, of course, was there. He was there. He ultimately was the guy that decided to go into Malheur. The whole thing stemmed from this meeting, the rally that they had in favor of the Hammonds, which, by the way, the Hammonds, even though they received a presidential pardon from Donald Trump, now, I almost feel like we have to briefly explain that. The allegations were arson. You got to understand, folks, if you're new to the broadcast, the Bureau of Land Management is a bureaucratic agency that has been really at odds with people out in the West for a long time. They were originally started, they were supposed to be helping the ranchers
and that was their original purpose. But since that time, this enmity between ranchers, there's been a constant, I don't want to say pissing match, but really, I mean, that's kind of what it is.
It's kind of a war because the BLM is working with the large corporations to put the small operations out of business.
Yeah,
you know?
and the whole point is that get them off the land. In some places, return the land to nature in accordance with Agenda 21. In other cases, it's being done in the favor of the big ag industry, like we were talking about before. In the case of the Hammonds, there were a couple of different incidents where fire had started nearby the Hammond Ranch. One of them was started by lightning, and it burned over. It was burning over onto the Hammond property. They were fighting fire with fire and lit a fire to burn out because it was headed toward one of their buildings, as I recall.
Right. It's called a backfire.
Yes.
They set a backfire. And what it does is that they control the side of the fire that they set, and it burns towards the fire that's coming,
removing all the
them.
Fuel, and basically
and so in the middle where they meet, the fire goes out.
Yes, and that's what they were trying to do, is fight the fire. Well, they were charged with arson over that. And there was another incident that was somewhat similar of that. I forget the exact details. But there were two separate incidents. For that, they were charged with arson. And this was a malicious prosecution, and even the judge on the case said that he didn't want to impose the mandatory minimum, which would have been 5 years, because he said it would shock the conscience to do so. So I think he gave them time served or something like that, and they got out, and then it ended up the prosecutor in the case, a very malicious person, obviously, went after him and said no. He appealed the thing and got the mandatory minimum reinstated. And so after getting out, they ended up going right back to prison. So it was.
I wrote about that, by the way. We'll have that in the show links.
Yes.
Because I researched it before I ever got involved. I researched the Hammonds and what happened to them, and so I do have a story about that.
It was an atrocious, I don't even want to say miscarriage of justice, because a miscarriage of justice implies that the real intent is justice. There was no intent of justice here. This was malicious prosecution. They were trying to get the Hammonds' land away from them, because the Hammonds' land borders on the Malheur National Wildlife Reserve, and they were the last ranchers standing in the area. Yes.
And so the BLM was trying to get the Hammonds Ranch away from them. And they were using regulatory racketeering to do it, the same way that they were doing with Clive and Bundy. And, just trying to put the ranchers out of business so they could add the Hammond property to the Malheur Reserve.
Yeah, and now, even though the Hammonds got a presidential pardon, which that is one thing I can thank Trump for, is at least he pardoned the Hammonds. But he should call off his dogs, because this BLM is still going forward.
They're going after him again.
Here we see from the Oregonian, judge revokes federal grazing permit for Hammond Ranches Incorporated.
And that's regulatory racketeering. Because if you can't graze your cattle, you can't have a cattle ranch. Period. End of story.
A federal judge on Friday, and let me see what this is dated, December 20th, so a week ago. A federal judge on Friday revoked the grazing permit for Hammond Ranches, finding that the former Interior Secretary Ryan Zenke's order renewing it early this year was, quote, an abuse of discretion. Dwight Hammond Jr. and his son, Stephen Hammond, both of whom were the ones that went to prison, as I was talking about earlier, they can reapply for a new permit and go through the proper process to obtain one, U.S. District Judge Michael Simon said. Neither Zenke or the U.S. Bureau of Land Management made a finding that the Hammonds were in substantial compliance with federal grazing regulations or had a satisfactory history of performance as required, the judge found. Secretary Zenke simply avoided the issue altogether under federal law and agency regulations. He may not do this, Simon wrote in a 41-page ruling issued after he heard oral arguments on Thursday. the Secretary's failure to comply with the governing statutes and regulations acknowledging his departure from agency policy and practices and provide a reasoned explanation for that departure are all serious errors, the judge found. Now, they have 3 environmental advocacy groups. They say the Western Watersheds Project, the Center for Biological Diversity, and Wild Earth Guardians had sued the Interior Secretary and the U.S. Bureau of Land Management, arguing that Zenke acted as if he was above the law by failing to consider the Hammonds' unsatisfactory record, and that's how it's written here, unsatisfactory record, or do proper environmental reviews before ordering the renewal of the grazing permit in February. So, it goes on from there. But the point is...
Again, using a legal process and these environmental groups, the Center for Biodiversity, they were there at the Malheur Reserve agitating against, and I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't the ones that were doing things that they blamed on the occupiers of Malheur, because he's a vicious little monster.
Yeah.
The guy who runs the Center for Biodiversity. But I mean, what the Environmental Protection Agency and the other agencies of government do is they have a system whereby these NGO groups sue and the government settles. And the settlement usually involves somebody losing their property, their business, their money, or whatever. It's all part of a racket that they have going on using the administrative systems of government.
Yeah. I want to get to this audio. This is Ammon Bundy's response to the... I just brought up the Hammond thing because as background, I know some people don't understand these issues when we talk about them if they're newer to the program. But the Hammonds... this unjust, malicious prosecution is the reason why the Bundys were out there in the first place. It's the reason why they protested. That the Malheur occupation was a protest against the overreach of government, and all they did was trespass.
And Clive and Bundy, the meeting at the Clive and Bundy Ranch in Nevada. Same thing. It was a protest
against government overreach.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, with that as background, here's here's Ammon Bundy.
Matt Shea is under attack by government institutions such as the Republican Caucus and the Police Guild of Washington. Seattle Times headline reads, Washington Representative Matt Shea engaged in domestic terrorism against U.S., says State House report. The article goes on, it says State Representative Matt Shea planned and participated in domestic terrorism against the United States before and during the armed takeover of Malheur National Wildlife Refuge, an investigation commissioned by the Washington State House found. The 108-page report found that beginning in November 2015, Shea, working with militia leader Ammon Bundy, myself, helped in the planning and preparation of the Malheur takeover. My friends, anybody else listening, including my enemies, that is a lie. If I was in the court, I would say that was a misrepresentation, but that seems too soft in this case because that is a flat-out lie. The report goes on to say that Representative Shea was a leader basically in 3 armed conflicts of political violence against the United States government. And there's talking about the Bundy Ranch, an incident where he helped a veteran keep his guns, and the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. None of those we used violence. None. The only violence that was used was violence by these government institutions. The very same institutions that are attacking Matt Shea. It says, immediately after the report was released, Representative J.T. Wilcox, the Republican minority leader of the House, said Shea had been suspended from any role in the House Republican caucus. He should resign, Wilcox wrote on Twitter. He cannot use House Republican staff. He cannot meet with the caucus. His office will be moved. Shea's name and picture were removed from the House GOP website. So they've completely blackballed him and tried to make him basically not exist as a representative. Many of you know why we went to the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge in protest of what they were doing to the Hammond family and many ranching families across the western United States, along with loggers, miners, and other land users. That was the point. That was the purpose. But let me show you why Matt Shea went to the Bundy Ranch, which I did not remember that he even went there. I don't remember having a conversation with him or anything of the type. But this report says he did go to the Bundy Ranch. Let me show you why Matt Shea went to the Bundy Ranch.
Okay, so I cut it there because, a lot of the stuff that follows is visual. Basically, what he showed was the Bureau of Land Management, these federal agents, these federal thugs, grabbing a grandma and throwing her to the ground, and tasing people. They were assaulting a pregnant woman. I mean, these people were just out of control. Just very aggressive.
Paramilitary police that are working for the Interior Department. Since when do agencies of government have their own police forces? Well, now they do.
Yeah.
And they're paramilitary, and they dress up like soldiers. They are soldiers.
We're getting down toward the end of the hour. We got a phone call from the state of Washington. Let's go ahead and take the call here real quick before we run out of time. Hello, caller. Thanks for holding on.
Hi, this is Jenna in Washington.
Hi.
Hi, Jenna.
Yes. We've been, Brian and myself have called in talking about biochar and the Pacific Northwest, but what we recall is we've been on the biochar initiative and getting it in legislation for a couple of years, and Shea was the original sponsor in 2018, along with Wilcox, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
It reflects the focus on an economic development that is needed in the Pacific Northwest, in this country. And, I think it says a lot about his, just like really where his interest lies. And I just, these names are just so familiar. Wilcox, Bryant's milled over at his place before. And where their focus ended up going. I put some links in the chat, the PDF of the biochar initiative. But
okay. Yeah, I watched the video of the lady that you sent me, but she's promoting sustainable this, sustainable that, and that kind of gets my makes me a little bit hesitant to have her on the show because she seems to be promoting Agenda 21.
Well, she works for the Forest Service. And I think it would be very interesting because the natural resource is what we've got. And people that have been, researching this, and she's been on this for a decade, the information is there. It's what people do with that information that can propel some change. Same with the guy in D.C. with his industry and how difficult it is. But there are people that are still, holding the flag for the idea of entrepreneurship, economic development, management of resources, and know how to do that because they've gotten this far with the information they have. So that's what I just wanted to add in.
All right. Well, I appreciate the call. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Love your show.
God bless you. Thank you.
Take care.
Yep. You too. Bye-bye. All right. There she is, Jenna in Washington. So I don't know what we can do about this, Vicky, because I think more people need to be aware that this is going on because, as you said, this is not going to stop with Matt Shea. Matt Shea is the tip of the spear. In many respects, Donald Trump was the tip of the spear.
Right. They're just setting the precedent to use the justice system to make accusations and to take out conservative lawmakers. Anybody that represents the regular people of this country they're going to take out. This is a communist revolution, you know?
Yeah.
And even though we don't have people, well, we kind of do sometimes have people in foxholes, but they're logical foxholes for the most part. But we are fighting for the life of our country, for the heart and soul of what is American, because this international trading system that our government signed on to, it is not American. It is un-American. It brings in foreigners to dump in our rural communities. That's something that the Democrats are doing too, is that they are trying to change the voting demographic in our rural areas to vote for this international system. If you bring in a bunch of poor people from a third world country and tell them that you're going to give them the world, we'll give you everything. All you have to do is vote for that big D on the ballot, and they'll do it.
Yeah, there's no question. This is a coup d'etat, and we use that word a lot, maybe too much, but that's exactly what it is. They are trying to take away all of our ability to govern ourselves and shove their sustainable development down our throat, their gun control down our throat. The situation I find interesting is going on in Virginia right now, where over 100 local counties and cities have pushed sanctuary cities for the Second Amendment, taking a play out of the Democratic playbook that they use for the sanctuary cities for, and it's funny how the double standard happens. Sanctuary cities are totally illegal, totally illegitimate, when they're used for upholding constitutionality. But when it's to promote illegal aliens coming into the country, hey, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. We've got to take the top of the hour break. When we come back, we should have Melody Hallett. Stay with us, folks. We'll be back.
Before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order. New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is hour number 3, the third and final hour of Govern America, here on the 28th of December, 2019, the final show of 2019. As we move on here through the show, joining us this hour will be Melody Hallett. She's of the Give Me Some Truth radio broadcast. It's actually called Truth Quest. Her website's Give Me Some Truth, and .info, I think is what it was. GiveMeSomeTruth.info. And she's joining us right now, I believe, Melody. Oh, let me hit the button. Then she'll be joining us. Hello, Melody. How you doing?
Darren? Great.
Yeah. Glad
Hi, Melody.
Hi, Vicky.
It's been a long time.
It's been 8 years since I've done radio.
Yeah, so you're not doing your show anymore.
No.
You did that for how many years?
I did it for 5, but I like I said, I haven't been in radio since 2012. So
wow,
just following and listening to people like you and others. So.
Yeah,
you had to go infiltrate the other side, find out what's on their side. Right? You became a city council person.
Right.
Yeah, why don't you start by before you get into the city council stuff? Why don't you talk about how? Because I don't think you and I have ever discussed this before.
Okay.
You've actually filled in for me a number of times back when I was an RBN. Now it's a little bit different because I almost have to be here to run the board. Be nice to be able to hand it over to somebody from time to time. But anyway, how did you come to wake up to all of these things? Did you kind of always know what was going on, or did you? Was there a certain point where you saw information or the way things were going that kind of opened your eyes to these issues facing our country?
Well, I guess I've always been a skeptic, but back in about 2000, I started reading and spending more time trying to get into things that I had questions on, and I was looking into Maurice Strong, and that's when I started trying to find information on him, and when I did, I was kind of quite surprised where that led me, because I did not realize that him being from Canada, that Canada was such a huge participant in the world with non-governmental organizations, and it really kind of put me in a tailspin between that one, and then I had my life as I guess a liberal progressive without even knowing it, but it didn't take me long to kind of realize that I don't think that's where I fit. So.
Yeah. Well, let me just point out something. Canada is a dominion of Britain, and they are a member of the Commonwealth of Nations. So if you refer back to what I was ranting about in the first segment, you'll hear why Canada is so enmeshed in this Agenda 21 stuff and the international trading system.
Mm-hmm.
Right. No, and it didn't take me too long to figure out that they were utilizing these non-governmental organizations as the funding mechanism to help supplant some of these governments in other countries around the world. I mean, because they didn't really regulate them, and from what I could take from that, but they devoted a whole chapter in the one book by Ellen Dewar, The Cloak of Green, because he was, again, the one that started the Earth Summit back in the 90s, I believe. But he had kind of moved down in the next county back in the 70s when he bought a large Spanish land grant that had previously been owned by Adnan Khashoggi and passed to the Arizona Land and Cattle Company. And so you started seeing a lot of connections that Aspen Institute. So there was things that was just kind of leading me in that direction from what I was reading. And then where I lived for 25 years, you could hardly get radio, TV, or anything, decent telephone service. And finally, when I moved into town, I got hooked up to the broadband, and from that point on, I just started listening to the radio and everything I could listen to. But it took a while before I found RBN and some of the other networks. But that's how I got into it.
Well, good. Yeah, everybody's got a different story. It's always interesting to me. You mentioned Khashoggi. I wonder if is that the uncle of the Jamal Khashoggi who was murdered in Saudi Arabia?
Yes,
yes, he. We're related.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought, because he's also, I was studying some information from Whitney Webb last night of Mint Press News. She's done a very good job at going into this whole Jeffrey Epstein thing, and that was a name that came up during her investigation of the Epstein scenario, and it was kind of amazing to me to find that they were related.
Yeah, I think he was like the largest arms dealer. They'd done pieces of on him on 60 Minutes. I think he also had a brother that lived in Las Vegas that I'd run into somebody that had worked with him out there, but the brother. But
well, that's interesting, because the Mandalay Bay Hotel that, where that shooting incident was, that was in large part owned by, I don't think it was Saudis, but I think it might be Saudis or UAE. I forget. I did write a story about that, though.
Huh.
So
that further.
Yeah. So you're living in Colorado, and it's by the way, it's beautiful out there. I was out there a few years ago on my journey out west. The multiple states in, I think, like 9 days or something like that. It was insane. I slept every other day. A lot of driving, but boy, is Colorado beautiful. But you also have a hotbed of Agenda 21 going on there, where all of the micromanagement of resources is taking place. What do you see out there on the ground right now in terms of Agenda 21 implementation?
Well, we have a huge influx from Boulder moving down in this area. It's finally been discovered, and so it's really starting to take off. And so what used to be kind of a ranching, mining, blue-collar community is now, it turned into a tourist. And, it's always been a tourist, but it got more and more. And now we've got so many of the people that are left thinking that they've changed the whole flavor of this whole area. And that's what, when I was on city council, what we ran into. And, it was like a buzzsaw, because they used all of the tactics that you see going on at the top. In fact, when they started with the election cycle, it was 2 years ago that we were voted out. They sent a lot of money in here to fight us.
Right. Well, that's a strategy of the left. And I heard the best rant the other day on the program Douglas Ducote. He had on a guy named Gold, who has a website called Border Command. And I'll give you the link to put in the show notes, Darren, because he did the best rant on that. And he talked about how the liberals actually move people into an area to create a blue voting block. And they bring money and blue votes and turn it blue. So they're killing off conservatives throughout our country. That's how this whole... Yeah, because I'm hearing similar stories from other states. Certainly Texas has been historically, other than little pockets of extreme left like Austin, Texas has been historically largely a conservative state. And now I'm hearing more and more that there are people flooding into Texas from California. I think part of the migration, and that certainly has happened here in Michigan as well. At one point, they had Little Hollywood being formed up north, and I think it's Traverse City. Around the Traverse City area, they were talking about making that into another Little Hollywood, so we had movie directors and what have you moving up there. I haven't heard anything more about that lately. The legislature here was trying to pass certain measures to make it more attractive, to make Michigan a filming state, because they had gutted our economy to the point where everything, it was almost, we had a joke here that, the last one out of the state turned off the lights, because it was a mass migration. Well, that was a joke in Seattle, too. Yeah. So after Boeing, before Boeing left, actually, but we had this... We had this mass migration here, and there were people coming from California, and so I'm hearing more and more about this migration taking place
from liberal states like California to other places, and you're saying it's a kind of an orchestrated effort.
It's a strategy. Mm-hmm. The left is very highly organized, and the right, the conservatives, we're all just kind of independent, living our lives like sitting ducks. In our little towns, we're just like sitting ducks, and we have all of these liberals, these left liberals, that move into your town and take over. And they did that in Twin Falls too.
Well, and
the town that I'm in.
To be fair, I mean, how do we define the left? Because many of these people are government employees. Many of these people are being paid by people like George Soros. They've got all the funding, and we're working our tails off just to make ends meet to support our families.
They embed themselves in the community colleges and the universities.
Yeah, and every other institution.
And then they're the ones that the students. The young people are the ones that get all of the propaganda. They turn the young people against their own families, against their own communities, against their own values and traditions.
Right. So we say often on this show, people should run for their city council. People should get involved in local government. And you were there, Melody.
Well, and to tell you, we had, the only reason I think we got into office as we did is because of timing, and they weren't prepared to fend off a group of us that decided that we were going to join the council. I wouldn't have run, except that we couldn't get anybody that would run for my ward, but we did get enough to overbalance the council to get things changed 2 years in, but those first 2 years were ugly, and then it was a very strong learning lesson for me, and even when I was voted out, I kind of went through a depression, and I know that I wasn't the only ones that were voted out that went through that, but it was a rude awakening to understand how strong, how organized the other side was. But then once that I have been out, I've been able to go back in and realize this movement didn't start anytime soon. It's been going on for decades, probably at least a century. So, and maybe even longer than that. These people had, definitely set up a plan, and they were going to use whoever was willing and able to be sucked into their, machinations. Mm-hmm. It's just,
Well, you've got organized efforts like people like George Soros. I come back to him for a moment. It's been well known that Soros has been trying to sponsor and actually been, working with groups on a local level, funding them to do exactly what you just described. So
right.
I don't know if that was what happened in your particular case, but, I mean, it's impossible. Well, I won't say impossible. It's very hard to compete against that type of resources, those type of resources.
Yeah, you can't, because they bring in money. They bring in money and Agenda 21 ideas. They promise economic development for your local little town. Mm-hmm. And so, a lot of people get blinded by the money.
Yeah, go ahead, Melody.
Well, there was now my mind's gone blank of the name of our governor, but
that's okay.
Part of the Gang of Five that had a ton of money, and his money, when you start looking at the way this guy had sold off a software company to fund his becoming some kind of a billionaire, mm-hmm. It wasn't by accident. He was set up to come in here and in this state and take it over. There was Gil and Pat Stryker and
the Stryker family is huge. I mean, they've got a presence here in Michigan as well. They're the ones that make the hospital beds and hospital equipment and things like that. I've heard a lot about the Stryker family, and they're questionable practices. Let's just put it like that.
Yeah, and and our they I mean, as soon as they got in, they even changed our state whatever they call motto sign. I can't remember what you call it, but it's a purple rainbow in it.
Huh.
Oh God!
There's that color purple again.
Yeah, well, and one of the people in town said when the governor came, he had purple shoes on. But I mean, they're really trying to put that message across, and so yeah. But when it comes to city council work, you need to definitely get a group to be able to organize and see this. The other side had. What they did is they started by getting on all the committees that fed into the city council. So they had plenty of time to be indoctrinated into who they were willing to accept, even let them run, and if they would be able to work with them, because they'll pretend they want a varied voice, but when you really do have somebody that doesn't agree with them, they will ostracize you. They will do everything within their power to.
Now, by they, who are you talking about? The other council members, or
members of the other members of the council?
Okay.
And it doesn't just it's not just there, because I was just talking to somebody recently whose husband made the same comment when he was on the school board. They do not want a discussion. They want to be able to show up to meetings and have everything decided and have it go their way. They're not into any kind of battle or discussion. They go on and on about civility, but it's the last thing they really want is anybody to not agree with them.
Okay,
so
now
it was
as somebody who's been there, and you've experienced this firsthand. Do you think why is that? Do you think the reason is because they're on the take somehow? Are they getting instructions from outside organizations? What's going on here that makes them have their own predetermined outcome as to what you're going to do on the city council? And if anybody else dissents, they have to be marginal.
Well, one thing that you got to realize is nothing is as it appears, and you, and that being that I came from kind of a alternative media and looking for the real meaning and why fors of way things go, I had been able to set through and pick through where the issues were. But your municipal league is hugely involved in the undermining of our city governments. I mean, they look good on the surface, looking like they're supporting the elected officials. They're all about creating an appointed official environment. And then the schooling, when you have your administrators and everybody comes out of the same type of school, and if they didn't get it in school, they will, when they go to their conferences, they learn all the techniques on how to control the councils. And I mean, they have made city councils pretty much neutered them. They find busy work to keep us busy so that we don't disturb their agenda, because what they've done is they've created home rule, and home rule is quite the opposite of what people think. They make it appear like you get to make everything up and rule from your own community, but they put these parameters and how they function in institutionalized them to the point that that's where you the doctrine that they have come up with is spread through the schools to the employees and staff, and they go out of their way to make sure that councils are really just kind of I always forget the term I want to refer to, but they're just not they're not anything but just a rubber stamp to their agenda.
Yeah, it's a facade of a government the way that it should be. It's a facade of representative government, but it isn't.
Right. And I, every time I would show up to council meetings, I would ask our administrator, I go, who's coming up with these plans on projects and whatever? Well, because, and so funny, I was able to go to a American conference for the planners, APA, American Planners Association, and see what was going on. Well, they had asked during the meeting, and there's about 500 or 600 people there, and they asked how many of us were elected officials, because most of them were, hired by the elected officials. And as soon as they asked us to raise our hands, there was probably a handful of us and whatever. I may as well told them I had leprosy, They avoided me like the plague the rest of the meetings, but it gave me a sense of where these projects were coming from and how these people kept coming up with the same homogenized plans to bring into the cities. And I've been able to travel around the country in the meantime, paying attention to the streets and the buildings and the infrastructures that they were doing in these other cities. And it was interesting to see how we're all just being homogenized into, the plans that come from international.
It's a cookie-cutter system, isn't it, Mel?
Yeah.
And the way the agenda is transmitted is through the associations, like you say, the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the National Governors Association and the Association of State Legislators. And there is coordination at the top, and but they transmit the agenda through these associations down to your elected officials. And so that's why you never see it. It's all behind the scenes. It's there, but you don't.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Are you there, Vicky?
What?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, you cut out there for a second. I'm wondering, Mel, what is you mentioned asking them repeatedly where all this stuff is coming from, and that you finally were able to attend an American Planning Association meeting. What would they tell? I'm curious as to what their answer was when you would ask these questions. Did they just kind of brush you off, or did they avoid the issue? Obviously you must have been kind of an outsider to this little clique, apparently, because if others on the council weren't being marginalized like you were, then it must have been something that they didn't really. It's almost like they didn't want you to know. Is that the way it was, or how did that work? What was their response when you would inquire as to where all this stuff is coming from?
We had a pretty astute administrator, and she'd come up from being a city planner, and that seems to be common that a lot of them administrators, city managers come up through this planning association, because that's where your bucks and so much of the projects come from. So when they work together, then they don't want the interference of council unless they're going to rubber stamp them, because again, we're the ones that can effectively hire and fire the directors of these positions. But what they do is they've learned to control us through staff, and it was a real learning experience, and I've went off in another direction. So bring me back and what you're.
Well, I was just kind of curious as to what their response was when you were asking them where all this planning stuff, where all these initiatives come from, because they have their own predetermined outcome, it seems.
Yeah, no, they would brush us off, and they would do circular arguments, because one of the first things we were trying to do was really dig into the financials, and we just kept going on the circular argument because they didn't want us to get into where the money was being being sectioned out and not seen by the public. In fact, we would show up to meetings, and she would give us between 300 and 500-page agendas.
Wow!
Like 3 nights before our meeting. Oh yeah, and most of it was minutia. She pretty made up her mind.
That sounds perfectly like what they do with Congress. Hey, hold it right there. That's a good place to leave off. Let's take the break. We'll come back with Melody Hallett. Give me some truth.info. And she was a former city council member as well. And she's sharing her experiences here on Govern America. Stay with us, folks. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
Where the spooks go to find out what's really going on. This is Govern America.
All right, we're in the final half hour of the show. This is Govern America. Vicky Davis is here. I'm Darren Weeks, and we're visiting with Melody Hallett, former talk show host, former city council member, and her website is givemesometruth.info, which leads to her Truth Quest website, where she has all of her archives posted from her past radio interviews, and she has done a bunch of them. Spent many years on the air and doing the work, trying to expose the truth, get the truth out there for various people on various networks and radio stations in her area. And she's been very active and learned a lot over the years, and she's sharing her knowledge with us today. Melody, you said before the break that you had that they would give you large, voluminous reports or whatever to go through, like, would you say 500 pages or something like that, with just a few days to do it? I mean, that's busy work. Mm-hmm. That's busy work.
Yeah, no, that was, and it didn't take too long before you had to, for me to figure it out, but a lot of people don't, because they didn't, if you don't do some homework before you run and really get acquainted with that, sitting through all the different meetings. I attended every meeting I could think of in my area, even my county meetings and whatever, so you get a good feel of who the cast of characters and where their roles are. Because if you don't, you will find yourself easily wedged out of making any inroads, and you better have a group of people there to back you up, because there's no way one person can learn all the things that it would take you 20 years to learn all the things that would you run across when you're on a city council. And so you depend upon others, but at the same time, you better not depend upon others, too. You better do your homework, because there's a lot of people that have been put in there to steer you in a direction where they want you to go. So
yeah, it's kind of like dialoguing into consensus, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we had all these roundtable meetings, and I had to educate, our group on that, so that when we went to these meetings, that we could deflect them and not let them just keep, shining us on and pretending that the public was making these decisions when they weren't. They're all predetermined.
So you saw the Delphi technique in operation, I take it.
Oh, yeah, constantly. They're still using it constantly, but at least we were able to call it out and point out to other people how to deal with it. Your municipal league, what they do is they'll publish salaries and things in this state, but they don't really connect the salaries to the job description. And so we've got, with our administrators, the first thing they do is they come in and try to buy off the staff, and so they have their allegiance. And if you aren't already well connected to people on the staff, again, staff can make it impossible to do your job. And they're always and that's an area of abuse because some of these people are making ridiculous salaries, even for areas that are small. And we were, one thing we did do is me and another person took a number of classes on finances for city governments, and we were able to get in and be able to find things that we could maybe change to accomplish getting at the monies that were being hidden, and they can sit there and say, there was no proof on it, because what we found out is we pushed every button all the way up to the state level. There is absolutely no oversight, and they don't want oversight.
Yeah.
So
well, that makes perfect sense.
Bill, did your city have a city manager?
Yeah. Well, we're set up as a statutory city, which they have tried their darndest to try to make us go home rule, which is a free-for-all for the laws, But your statutory city at least has state statutes to follow, and that we were set up under the type of system with an administrator instead of a manager. Managers have more power, and our manager had pretty much gone in under and gotten the city attorney to help in rewriting, and this was with the approval of the council, because these people don't care. They just want to get, do their council work with as least effort as possible, so that they pretend the staff knows what they're doing. And I'll tell you, you're doggone lucky if they do. Some will know various aspects of the law and how to run things, but it's scary to see who's running our governments. Now, but in the meantime, what?
I was just going to say, you had mentioned it a couple of times. I want to come back to home rule for just a second.
Okay.
Because in my studying that, it's just another form of regionalism, but it's a form where, my understanding of home rule, they sell it as more autonomy for the people.
Right, but it's the last thing that it is.
Yeah. Can you elaborate a little bit about, how home rule works?
Ultimately, you get together and the people come up with get a group of people and how they were going to do it here, and they were going to, sit down and write a charter. And the charter, can pretty much boot out a lot of the laws. They claim that the state statutes, override that in certain instances. But again, your higher dignitaries in the state don't want to mess with municipal home rule or county home rule law. And by the way, in our state, and I don't imagine it's different at other places, when you go into municipal elections, unless you have a county, state election official in there, they don't touch municipal elections. We couldn't get help on municipal elections because none of them are trained in it or want to touch it, because it's different. And once it's municipal, once it's home rule, you've got 100 different cities in this state alone that were home rule that could be totally, run different than another city.
Yeah, can we describe what exactly is home rule? Is it a
rule is
because it can be cross-border too, right?
You make a charter, which to me tells me that once you're a charter, you're incorporated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now you're running under a different type of law that pretends to be under the law of our Constitution. But I would venture to say that when it came to following the law, it was almost meaningless.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, with the way our cities and countries running, there is no rule of law. Yeah, all your lawyers are utilized to do is how to figure out how to get around the law. There are some that will follow the law, and we had a few that were helping us out, but you cannot make somebody that doesn't want to follow the law follow the law. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, Melody. If they were to set up, if you become a charter city, could you turn your town into a free enterprise zone for international commerce?
I don't know what would stop you. I mean, because so much of this is tied into when they send all these so-called experts into your town, and they'll send a ton of them. One way or the other, they're all connected to your global government.
Mm-hmm.
If you start doing your homework. And, people think that, they have control of things, but I'll tell you, somebody's steering it, and it isn't coming necessarily from the local people.
No.
That's really interesting. I'll have to do, because what it reminded me of when you said charter city, the design of the global economy is for the population centers to be the political power centers. And
right.
That's how they're disintegrating nation states, is by realignment of loyalties to the global system, because that's where they make all their money, is by becoming an independent global city under the system of international commerce.
Right, and it's intermixed in there. If you didn't already have a eye for it, a lot of times you're gonna miss it. But we're so far down the road on globalism. It's not funny, and that's the more since I've been out of office, have I been able to realize, the only difference between us and not being and I know I'm jumping out there saying this, communist, socialist country, is the fact that we're just not saying it. We've got many of the aspects. It's just not everything is in place exactly as they want it to be, but
I would say the biggest thing that differentiates us from other overtly communist countries is the fact that the people are still armed here.
Yeah,
they can't say it because
I think it's just a matter of time, Darren.
Well, and it could be that they use this Virginia rebellion in some fashion, but I think there's a real genuine organization on the ground among the ordinary people to push back against this tyranny that the Democrats in Virginia are pushing upon the people. Over 100 local governments now have passed some sort of sanctuary city thing for Second Amendment rights. Now, and that's also spread to some other states as well, and I haven't done exactly the homework on how many, but the thing is catching fire. And that's why we have the Second Amendment in the first place, is to push back against tyrannical government. But, we know the other side is going to use this as an opportunity to try to further push for the taking away of our firearms rights. And I say that because I think that's the fundamental issue here. There's so much that they would just take the mask off. I mean, already they have taken their mask off on numerous different tyrannical measures. The First Amendment is under major attack with all the censorship going on and the persecution of real journalists, people who are genuinely trying to get truth out. Of course, the people at CNN are never going to be targeted, despite their moaning and, when Trump calls them fake news. I mean, they're not targeted at all. They're protected because they're establishment. But real people, real journalists on the ground, they'll lock you up. They'll put you in prison. And they have before. I mean, look at Julian Assange. I mean, they're trying to extradite him to the United States. He's locked over there in Belmarsh prison, and his health is failing. That's what they think of real journalism. So my point in this is that the only thing that really separates us from any authoritarian government that's overt is the fact that the people still have the ability to defend themselves from overt and authoritarian government. What do you say?
Well,
I think you're
exactly.
Right. Go ahead, Melody.
But I've been watching how they manipulate that and I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if we don't, if they, with their incrementalism, hitting it up at the Second Amendment in one way and in another way, and before long, there won't be much left to defend if we don't stand our ground. But I mean, we're really, it's interesting times, because I don't know the answer to it, because these people have had a long time of trying to control people from centuries, you know. I mean, it's so.
What do you think of all these?
It's very insidious. Everything that they're doing that is allowing them to convert our system of government, to disintegrate our system of government, it's all very insidious. And it's done administratively.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, in fact, that's what we've got as administrative government, and that's what I saw when I was in there. Again, they let us vote on things that, the administrator didn't have that much that they cared about, but she just used, we'd get to vote on things that she pretty much already, manipulated and got what she wanted anyways.
Right, like the color of the curtains. You get to vote on the color of the curtains.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah, they totally remove you from the process. And that's the thing that really, I guess, as I look at our system, the whole reason why we have a system of federalism in our country is to protect against this type of thing where, local government, people have more control, you would expect. That's the way it was supposed to be. You don't have the federal government in your own backyard. And you have the people have more say because they're closest to the elected officials in their area. And now it seems like everything that's going on with all these, like American Planning Association, the National Council of Mayors, the National Conference of State Legislators, the American Legislative Exchange Council, all these organizations that are involved in state and local government is, it seems to me, an end round, a bypassing of the normal system of federalism that we have in our country, where the people are supposed to be able to decide. If you don't like the rules, you don't like the laws, you don't like the ordinances in one area of government, you can move. I mean, that's a drastic system, a drastic solution, moving. But if it becomes so tyrannical for you that you can't handle it anymore, you do have the option of moving. But if they uniformly make things across the board in such a way so that tyrannical government, that authoritarianism, that encroachment upon property rights, encroachment upon water rights, encroachment upon your ability to live in every way, shape, and form becomes universal, becomes across the board, you've got no place to run. And that's where we're headed, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. No, I could have never gotten to know what I know now about government having not been on the inside and gotten to see things that I normally wouldn't have seen. But, you really got to have nerves of steel and whatever to be able to work through a corrupt organization. And corruption's all around. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to break through it. We made a lot of inroads into what could have corrected where our city had been entrenched for years, but the people will never know, because if you're not a good politician on top of it and knowing how to use the press and having the support of staff and whatever, they can undermine you from every direction. So it's a real tricky thing. We had a lot of support, but we're not the politicians that it took to hit the next election and maintain where what we'd started.
Yeah.
But it's a worthy cause, because all you can do is slow it down.
Well, what I'm hearing from you is the need for organization. The need for a groundswell of support, and an organization takes time, it takes money, it takes a lot of effort, and That's very much what's needed, and especially when you have outside entities creating scenarios where you are up against a stiff competition. Hey, we got a call on the line from Texas.
Okay. So let me say this: send in professional organizers and whatever to run the election, and ours is not supposed to be partisan. They send in partisan people to train these people on how to get us out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me one bit. Jerry in Texas, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for bringing me in.
Sure.
Thanks. First, they throw money at you in forms of grants.
Yes, that's exactly right.
You know, and there's stipulations on it, and it ends up costing you $10 for every dollar they give you if you're lucky. And that's on the school, county, city, state, all the way through. I just want to throw that. Y'all may have addressed that. I haven't caught the whole show. But something that struck me here just recently, and I don't think I've mentioned to you, Vicky or Darren.
Mm-hmm.
I go back and something hit me with Abraham Lincoln and a Gettysburg Address. What were some of his first words in that address? I had to memorize that when I was in grade school. I can't quote it anymore. But he said, in order to create a more perfect union. Hello?
Yeah.
About that. Had this mess already started? I think so. I think it started when we got our supposedly independence from the...
Yeah, the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, I mean, you know...
Mm-hmm.
You could be right. He said 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty, blah, blah, blah. Right?
Yeah. But in order to form a more perfect union, we get together the South against the North. The North didn't like what the South was doing. They was too independent.
Yeah, well, they
like a bug, and they did.
Yeah, and they perfected the Union based upon a lie. I mean, the whole thing is what they were doing is destroying the Union. They wanted to create their world union.
Well, not really. I mean, they were creating the beginnings of the Union, and what the USMCA is a customs union that now includes Canada and Mexico. Canada was always part of the Commonwealth, but now they're bringing us into it.
Well, I'm saying that the division between the North and South, ultimately, I look at it the same way as I look at the divisions between our nation's borders. The country couldn't be split apart.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, John Moore coined it, I guess, it was a war of northern aggression.
Yes.
What it did, essentially, was take each state, their sovereignty, and did away with it. I mean, it was gone.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a state sovereignty anymore. Even though I'm in Texas, we still have the right to secede. Or divide up into 5 states. But I have to try to do it here.
And I'm going to sound like a contrarian here, or maybe I'm going to sound like a Pollyanna, but I still maintain that if the people would get together and get organized, we could go a long way toward reclaiming our state sovereignty. The problem is they keep us distracted and fighting all that. Hold on just a second. They keep us distracted and fighting amongst each other all the time. I don't think that we're so far down the road that we couldn't reclaim it if we united and actually kept our eye on the real focus of where we should be. The problem is getting people to do that.
Well, it's not the people that would do that. It's the Attorney General, because if you're going to have your state...
Well, if you're going to rely upon the Attorney General...
reclaim states' rights, it has to be with the state standing up to the federal government.
And the only way the states are going to do that is if the people make them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but with the system that Melody is describing and with what I've observed, They don't pay attention to the people anymore. They pay attention to the money.
To me, that goes back to organization, though. We're not organized. We don't have the ability to apply the pressure because people aren't properly organized. If you get enough numbers, and maybe I'm naive and people would probably accuse me of being so. But
Darren?
Yeah.
Two things. First,
okay, we'll have to hurry because we're almost out of time here.
Yeah, okay. And then what was it, 17th Amendment, where they took changed the appointment of state senators by popular vote?
Yes.
No longer. Once they got voted in, we no longer had, because they were supposed to be ambassadors.
Mm-hmm.
They were supposed to be accountable to the state legislatures. But that went away. And it's just one little chip at a time, and here we are. Yeah. It's just like our airlines and NSA, TSA.
Yep.
Everybody say, all right, nobody is going to book a flight or buy a ticket for 48 hours, 24 hours. It wouldn't take long.
Jerry, I hate to cut you off, but we're just about off the air. So thanks for the call. I appreciate it. Very good points. Thank you for calling in. All right, Melody, I don't know if you have any concluding thoughts real quick.
Ultimately, I got to see up close and personal how they're doing everything that's being done at the national and international level, down at the local level, and corruption is everywhere, and there's a lot of people that are ignorant, willfully ignorant on some parts, and it is a tough system to correct if we're ever going to. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to stop them, because unfortunately, I think it really comes down to we're dealing with good and evil, and there's
no question about it.
Got a strong foothold here.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Well, and the thing is that I could be construed as being a little bit naive or maybe Pollyanna about the whole situation, but I like to leave people with a little bit of hope that it's not so far gone that we can't get it back. I think, that's why they keep us fighting all the time.
Yeah.
That's why they want to divide and conquer. And then it's the same old strategy.
I'm glad you do that, Darren, because I'm kind of
somewhat of a
the
fatalist.
other way.
Hey, Melody, thank you so much for being with us. This has been a delightful hour. We'll certainly do it again.
Very much.
All right.
Yeah, don't be a stranger, Mel. It was fun.
All right. God bless you, folks. We got to go. This is the last broadcast of the new year, or of the old year. We're going to have the new year coming right around the corner here. Hope you folks have a good, safe holiday. Watch out for those drunk drivers on the road. And join us back here next year for a new broadcast. Okay? In the meantime, pray for this republic. Do what you can to restore it. God bless each and every one of you. And thanks, Melody. Thanks, Vicky. Appreciate all you do.
Thank you. Have a happy and safe New Year.
Yep. God bless you, folks. Bye-bye.